What is up, fellas? The Goob here with another episode of Rewriting History with the Goob. Wasn't entirely sure what to title this one. Gonna try and cover several pretty big topics tonight. I mean, they're all related, but they're pretty big shifts away from the mainstream narrative, and I think I've got some pretty solid proof to shift that narrative. So this episode should be a pretty exciting one. Hopefully, I'm able to present all the material I want because it's a lot. Should be good. Before I get into it, though, I wanted to give a huge shout out to Mr. G, Mr. Galunas. You are definitely my favorite viewer. You are constantly calling in, and in each call, you're recommending something that's just fantastic. You probably noticed the thumbnail for today's video is the Hopewell Mound, the Hanukkah Mound that you brought up last week or 2 weeks ago in a call, and it's a really it's a big part of this. So massive shout out to you. The rest of you, come on, guys, you're slacking. Let's step up the game. You could learn a little bit from Mr. G. But yeah, no, thank you so much, Mr. Galunas. That is really awesome, and hopefully we'll get a call from your friend about the Lycurgus Cup. That would be very cool too. So some of the ideas that I'm gonna try and tackle today. I really appreciate it. You've been a big help for real. Like, I don't know exactly how many of the things you've mentioned that I've followed and have been very fruitful for me. So I greatly appreciate it. But a couple of the ideas I'm going to attempt to tackle. I'm going to attempt to tackle the Minoan and Michigan copper connection. You know, this idea of the Bronze Age being fueled by the copper in Michigan. I'm going to try and tackle the idea of pre-Columbian visitors and actually establish that not only did many different groups come over here, but actually settled over here and left an impact, and there's proof of this. I also want to tackle the idea of the level that America was at in the ancient past. There's this very strong idea that, you know, they're these primitive savages, these Stone Age savages. Actually, a few months ago in the Low Value Mail Discord, there was a pretty big debate about this topic, and there were a few people who were really, really convinced that, you know, these natives could only be these extremely simple, primitive Stone Age savages, and it couldn't be further from the truth. And in fact, generally speaking, the Americas were more advanced and just greater and grander in most scopes than Europe was, than the old world was at a comparative time. So some pretty big ideas I'm going to be trying to tackle. Before I get into that, I did want to do a little bit more, just a couple mentions quickly about the Joe Rogan debate, because that's a fun one. Dunking is a channel that I'm a fan of, at least currently, because he's saying things I like right now. Maybe later I'll have to condemn him. But currently I'm loving the content he's putting out. There's a new video coming out in an hour or two. But he did a video on the claim about grains, you know, the cultivation of grains, which I thought was pretty solid. Essentially, the summary is that we really just don't know. You know, Dibble's saying we know these things for certain. We can look at the grain record and we absolutely know these things. And the conclusion essentially is that, yeah, it's not nearly agreed upon like that. Even in the archaeological community, which likes to overestimate its ability to know things, even they acknowledge that, yeah, we don't know this thing. Similarly, he came out with a video on the ice cores, which I thought were possibly Dibble's strongest piece of evidence. Turns out they're not. Again, he's claiming, we absolutely know this. We absolutely know there was never any civilization before because the ice cores prove it. And the thing is, with the ice cores, there's this ice vault that has like hundreds of, I think it's like 450 miles. I might be exaggerating, but it was a ridiculous number. Just the amount of ice cores over there, ridiculous number. So do we have the evidence to try and make a determination one way or another? We possibly do. It just hasn't been looked at. These hundreds of miles of ice cores have not all been inspected in the way they need to be inspected to even try and make a determination whether or not, metallurgical civilizations existed when we're talking about them potentially existing, pre-Younger Dryas and stuff like that. So do we potentially have the data? Maybe, but we haven't even analyzed it yet. So the claim is completely bunk. And then one last thing with the Joe Rogan debate, the Yonaguni Monument, which Dibble absolutely refused to ignore. I mean, he basically wouldn't look at it. Go back and watch it. He physically did not want to look at the images. And he was laughing and dismissing and going, no, there's nothing about that looks man-made. That's ridiculous to even think that's man-made. And he kept making the argument that it didn't look anything like, I think it was Machu Picchu that Graham was comparing it to. I thought there were certainly some similarities. But someone else pointed out that, it doesn't look exactly like Machu Picchu. What it does look exactly like are several ancient quarries. The Yonaguni Monument, let me pull up an image real quick. Hopefully I know I'm live. I guess my computer's just lagging. The Yonaguni Monument, right? And I don't have these images pulled up conveniently to compare them, but you can go find them. The comparisons are out there, and yeah, there are ancient quarries that look almost exactly like this. This probably was not some type of, settlement and structure, but an ancient quarry that has since sunk underwater. Yeah, that seems very, very likely. And I hadn't seen that comparison before. So I'm really appreciating this Dibble debate because it's bringing a lot of attention to a lot of things. The Yonaguni Monument's been talked about pretty at length, and I'd never seen that comparison. So it definitely seemed to match. Yeah. Okay, so where to start with all of this stuff? I think I'll start with the Minoan relation to the Bronze Age and the Michigan copper, and try and sort that out, because there's a lot of claims being made here, a lot of claims being made on both sides, and like usual, there's a lot of claims that really can't be verified too well. Later on in the episode, I have solid stuff. I'm personally a bit tired of constantly presenting things that it's like, yeah, this could be, this could not be, and so I'm going to do a little bit of that here. But when I get into the later topics, I've got some really solid stuff. So it's, not so wishy-washy. So the claims with this theory are that in the ancient past, a massive amount of copper was mined from Michigan, from the Lake Superior region. And the amount of copper that we find in the Americas doesn't nearly account for the amount of copper that was mined from Michigan. At the same time that this copper was being mined in Michigan in massive quantities, the Bronze Age was happening in Europe. There's also claims that Europe doesn't even have enough bronze to supply the Copper Age, and some other claims going on as well. So how much of this is true? What can we actually narrow down? Well, what is true is that a massive amount of copper was mined from Michigan in the ancient past. And the copper mining in Michigan actually began before the Copper Age began in the Old World. So America is ahead of the game here. They are utilizing copper before anyone else in the world, at least that we have evidence of. So around 9,000 years ago, the glaciers receded and the lakes were very full of water. And around 9,000 years ago, the lakes started to subside. Their water level started to come down. And with that receding water level, it exposed all of this copper that's around Lake Superior. And this copper is just sitting on the ground. Like, yes, you can dig down and find even more of it, but we're talking tons and tons and tons and tons of copper that are just sitting on top of the ground. 99.9% pure copper. So these people, the Native Americans, as the water line, lowered and they followed it because people live along water lines, they discovered this copper and they started using this copper. And initially, they were using it like stone. They were Stone Age people, and they were using this copper as a stone. They were just breaking off chunks. And unlike other stones where you chip it down to shape it, you could pound it down and shape it this way. So it was a newer, better stone for them to use. But they did start smelting this ore, despite the common perception that Native Americans never smelted copper. They did. They absolutely were. They didn't need to smelt copper, in that the copper that's found in Europe is in ore form. It is not just pure copper. You're getting like 3% copper mixed in with rocks. So you have to crush up all of these rocks. You have to heat the rocks, melt out the copper, and then further smelt the copper to further remove impurities from it. And it's a very long and laborious process. With the copper in Michigan, you just break off a chunk, and then you either pound it into shape or you melt it down and pour it into shape. It's very, very simple. And they were doing this. They were doing this. And what's interesting is that the same pattern that I've pointed out all across the world, all across civilizations, is that they reached copper smelting pretty early on. They were doing this 7,000 years ago, and they were creating copper tools. They were pouring copper tools. They were making axes. They were making ridiculous amounts of copper tools, allegedly, with all the copper they're pulling up, right? Even though we haven't found nearly enough to account for all of that copper. And then as time went on, they seem to have lost the ability to smelt the copper, and you're no longer actually melting down and pouring this copper, and they're just pounding it into shape. And then as more time goes on, they kind of lose the ability to work the copper at all. They pretty much stop. Not entirely. There are still copper artifacts that are found in later Native American tribes and areas, but a lot of this is like passed down. It's inherited. It's certainly not the mining and usage that we see in these very early time periods, 9,000 years ago, 7,000 years ago, 5,000 years ago. So the copper usage started pre-Copper Age in the Old World. America was using copper first. They were smelting copper first. And they were doing this in massive, massive quantities. Now to the point of Europe not even having enough copper to fuel the Bronze Age, I don't know. I've seen both sides claim it both ways. I'm going to go ahead and assume that it's not true, but I truly couldn't tell you one way or the other. What we do know is they had a whole lot of copper over there during the Bronze Age. And we do know they were producing copper in places like Crete. There's obvious evidence of that. They were smelting copper. They were producing it there. Did it all come from there? It's hard to say. In claims of testing copper and determining it's from Michigan become very murky. I do not have any books to recommend. There are a couple books. There's 2 books that are written on this topic about the Michigan Minoan connection, and I have not read either of them. So no. But there are 2 books out there by 2 different authors. So a lot of like, if you could test copper and determine where it originated from, that would settle this debate, right? Just go over and test the artifacts in Europe and figure out where that copper came from. Well, the thing is, this is being done, and like I said, the results are very murky. So, according to archaeology, every single copper artifact that has been found in an archaeological context and that has been tested for lead isotopes does originate in Europe. That might sound pretty conclusive, but I think around 1% of these artifacts have been found in an archaeological context. Most things that are found are someone finding them. You know, they're tilling a farm, or they're digging a foundation for a house, or they're, making a road, whatever. And something gets unearthed, and then it gets brought in at some point, or it doesn't get brought in. A lot of artifacts never get brought in. And an archaeologist looks at it, and then it's not found in situ, so they're really not able to do a whole lot with it. They're not able to date it. They're not able to definitively say, yeah, we know you actually found this here, and this was an artifact that originated here from this culture and stuff. So on top of that, the majority of these artifacts, from my understanding, that are even found in an archaeological setting are not necessarily tested for their lead isotopes. It costs money to test for these things. They're not running this test for every single piece of bronze that they find. And then, of artifacts that are not found in an archaeological context, there have been bronze artifacts that have been found in the old world that have been tested, whose copper makeup does come from the Great Lakes. It does come from Michigan. So, and there have been several of these. It's not just one or two. So to try and definitively say one way or the other where the source for the copper of the Bronze Age came from is, to me, you can't really say. And even to try and make a guess of like, okay, did a portion of it come? Did any of it come? Did most of it come? It's the information out there is just not solid enough. There's claims also of this shipwreck off of Crete with these oxide ingots. And again, both sides make completely conflicting claims about this. They are, what doesn't seem to be in dispute is these oxide ingots are 99.9% pure copper, which matches the level of purity in Michigan. You can purify copper through smelting. You can achieve high levels of purity through smelting. And the only way to truly determine the origin of this copper is to test the lead isotope ratios. Because even if you remove most of the lead from the copper, you still, the remaining lead is still within certain ratios of lead isotopes. There's different isotopes of lead, and different parts of the world have different ratios of these isotopes. So if you determine the ratio of the isotope, you can pinpoint where that copper came from. The mainstream claims that this has been lead isotope tested, and it matches Crete. It is old world copper. The alternate historians claim that they haven't done this, and that the only way to achieve 99.9% pure copper in the ancient past was by sourcing it from Michigan. I actually did quite a bit of research into ancient techniques for copper smelting, how they would have done it, how pure they would have been able to get it, and I struggled to find hard, definitive answers. But from my very limited understanding of the process, it would be extremely difficult to get 99.9% pure copper through ancient copper smelting techniques. It would be a level of labor that wouldn't seem to make sense to me. Not necessarily that it's impossible, but if you could produce a relatively pure 95% copper or something like that, for a small fraction of the amount of labor, and that also is assuming that they they truly did have the know-how to even take it to that level. I don't know. It does make me a little dubious. And even though they claim that, yes, this has been lead isotope tested, you see the kind of claims that Dibble made in his debate, right? You see these kind of claims that are made by archaeology quite frequently. And sometimes they do have what they need to back it up, but far too often they don't. And so I don't know with any certainty, but it wouldn't surprise me greatly if the claim that those oxide ingots had been lead isotope test wasn't even true. The idea that the copper came from America is rather interesting. I don't know how valid it is. Another one of the claims, some of the other claims to support this idea that are made are that the pottery found in ancient Michigan matches Minoan pottery, and that the tools used and found around these ancient copper mines in Michigan match Minoan tools used to mine copper in Crete and such. So I could find absolutely zero supporting evidence that there is similar pottery in Michigan to the pottery of the Minoans. I did find some ancient Michigan pottery. I did find some very, very old examples of pottery in Michigan from these time periods where this mining was going on. It did not seem to resemble Minoan pottery to me. I mean, vague similarities, right? You make a vase, it's going to kind of look like another vase, but I really would not call these similar whatsoever. As for the tools being used, there's a little bit to it. So they initially were using smooth axes to break off this copper and to mine this copper. And at some point they switched to notched axes. And notched axes are what they used in the Minoan culture. And so the theory is that these notched axes were introduced by the Minoans. Maybe, but we really don't see anything else to suggest this Minoan connection other than the Newberry tablet, which I'll cover in a moment. What was the other piece of evidence I just mentioned? Right, I didn't mention it yet, but the other claim is that the fall of the Minoan civilization lines up with the end of the copper mining in the Americas. So using various methods, using many, many different methods, dating of copper mining has been put back to 7,000 years in Michigan. So dendrochronology and carbon dating and other types of dating have all been used in completely independent studies, all pointing to this 7,000 year mark for copper mining in Michigan. And then another study that studied lake cores, pretty much the same idea as ice cores. The dust settles on top of the lake, it floats down to the bottom, it settles there in layers, and you can pull up a core from the bottom of the lake and figure some things out from the environment. Lead dust in particular is very heavy and it settles very well at the bottom of the lake. So if you have increased lead production, you're going to find that in the lake cores. And lake cores of several of the lakes around that area were taken, and they showed spikes in lead, which would indicate spikes in copper mining and smelting in the area that go all the way back to 9,000 years, but definitely 7,000 years and up through like 5,000 years. The Minoan civilization ended due to a volcano, a rather large volcano that wiped out their island and erased their civilization. I tried to line up the dates of when copper production ended in Michigan and the Minoan civilization, and they seem to be off by about 400 years. So I don't think that's really supporting evidence either. I guess it could be that the natives here continued to mine copper for 400 years after the Minoans left and were destroyed. but it doesn't really line up. And one thing that was rather interesting, going back to ice cores about the Minoan eruption, is that archaeologists and scientists cannot figure out when the heck it actually happened. They've got it narrowed down to a couple 100-year range, but they do not know when it actually happened. This was a very major eruption. This was a big volcano that went off, not a small deal. And they looked at ice cores to try and determine when it was, and they came back with a whole bunch of different results going, yeah, well, maybe it's this line in the ice, maybe it's this line in the ice, we really don't know. It could be any of these lines in the ice, and then on this ice core over here we have completely different lines. It could be those, and they really have no idea. And then those ice core suggestions are even a few hundred years removed from other dating methods that have been used, and those other dating methods were relatively consistent within about a 200 time period, and then the ice cores were like 200 years more removed from that. So this is far more recent than, like the Younger Dryas event, which is when this civilization, this advanced civilization that Graham talks about, that might have been wiped out. And it was a far larger event, and we know exactly where it was, right? And we still cannot pinpoint this in the ice cores. They're still just like, maybe. So the idea of looking at ice cores from 12,000 years ago, in various parts of the world to determine that there was no civilization in any part of the world is utterly ridiculous to me. But all right, so the Newberry tablet. The Newberry tablet. Let's see what you guys are saying. What are you fellas talking about? Yeah, I think Mormon literature, big part of the takeaway of this episode, if I cover everything tonight, is it seems the Mormons were right. Yeah. By the way, this episode, I'm gonna show an image here in a second, but pretty much just a listening episode. Feel free to pop me in your pocket or something, because I don't have much to show off. But the Newberry tablet, let's pull this up. So this was found in Michigan, and this is a really big piece of the Minoan connection, because this tablet resembles Linear A. If you try and listen to the mainstream, they suggest some other language that it resembles. I can't even remember what it was, but I looked at the alphabet and I looked at this, and there were like 2 symbols that were similar. There's more symbols that are similar on this that match with like the Michigan relics than the supposed language suggested by the mainstream, which I don't understand their reasoning. It was I don't know why you would do that, because the Linear A, as you can see here, someone comparing Linear A symbols to the symbols on here. It's not a perfect match by any means, but there clearly are similarities. Linear A being this pre-Phoenician, pre-Greek language that was used by the Minoans. It's in a museum still today. It's pretty weathered. It was a clay tablet. It's dismissed as fake, just as all of these other things are. Like I said, this topic, I'm left really not drawing any firm conclusions. The Minoan connection to the Michigan copper, I don't know what to make of it. It is rather interesting how massive amounts of copper were being mined during the Bronze Age, and we don't see these massive amounts of copper in America. But other than that, it's really hard to make any kind of clear, definitive statements. Like I said, you've got artifacts that are Old World and have been lead tested to Old World sources. You also have artifacts that have been found in Europe that have been tested to Michigan sources. So, what do you make of it? All right. Let's. I want to do a quick refresher on some things I've covered before about the level of advancement in America. I'm going South America, North America, all of it. My what I'm positing is that all of it was far more advanced than the mainstream narrative would lead you to believe, and generally speaking, was the New World was more advanced than the Old World for most of history. So I covered that they started mining copper first. They started smelting copper first. I've talked before about the trepanned skulls in the Aztec culture and time period. So I misquoted the modern day survival rate several times in older episodes. I was saying 84%. So trepanning is removing a chunk of your skull. The ancients did this for the exact same reason we do this today, despite the narrative being that it was all done for ritual purposes and it was all just trying to get the evil spirits out of people's heads. These crazy whack jobs were drilling holes in people's skulls to alleviate headaches and let out bad spirits. No, they were doing it for the exact same reason we do it today. Someone gets a blunt force head trauma, they get a cranial fracture, their skull is broken, and their brain is swelling, and the pressure is going to kill them. So we take a chunk of your skull out, try and relieve some of the pressure, and hopefully save your life. We're not very successful at it today because we don't have an 84% survival rate. We have a 74%, 73.5, right? 74% survival rate. In the Aztec times, they were achieving 91% survival rates. And just to be as totally transparent and as fair as I can, if I'm recalling correctly, that 91% came from a very small sample size. It was like 8 out of 9 skulls or something like that had this survival rate. But there are many other skulls in the Aztec time period and location where they were achieving 70 plus, 80 plus % survival rates. The 91% is the highest, but it's a slight outlier, but it is not entirely an outlier. There are many skulls that have been tested that have surpassed our modern day survival rate. So today we have a 73% survival rate. In the past, they had a 91% survival rate. Ridiculous. Doing brain surgery 25% more successfully than we are today. The Aztecs also had an incredibly accurate, cosmological calendar as well as, Earth calendar, which is something that the Old World struggled with throughout all of history. Essentially, that was a major hurdle for the Old World, and the Aztecs had it all figured out. They understood precession extremely well and extremely accurately. This is something that I've talked about. The difficulty of, I think, is vastly underestimated, generally speaking. I don't think if I dedicated my entire life to mapping the skies, would I get to the point of accurately mapping precession. So these people, they also had larger and more populous cities than the Old World did at the same time. And there's Cahokia in Ohio. It was bigger than like France and a bunch of other places at the same time. There's all of the South American locations which have already been revealed that we know about. And then now with the LiDAR scans that are going on in the jungle over there, we're constantly finding more and more and more. The level of that these people had dominated their land, had built roads spanning entire countrysides, had built these massive cities, it was dwarfing the Old World. And I remember years ago this high schooler found these two new pyramid complexes in South America, and he did so by mapping. I think it was the Pleiades star system on to America, and realizing that a lot of these major locations lined up with the star system. So he goes, well, there's a couple more stars over here, they should be over here. We're talking about like continent spanning planning here, right? These are not, this is not a small localized it's not like the Great Pyramids, which, they line up with Orion's belt. Yeah, and they're right next to each other. They're right there. We're talking about like thousands of miles away from each other. These locations have been mapped out onto the Earth to reflect the stars. So it's just, these people were not primitives. They were not savages. They were quite advanced. Okay, so the Hanukkah Mound. The Hanukkah Mound. I've got a lot of examples to support this of a Hebrew group of people coming to the Americas. Real quick, chat, I want you to guess for me. What time period do you think this Hanukkah Mound might come from? I've said this time period a few times in the last couple of weeks. I've pointed out that things seem to fall into this time period, these anomalous things that are finding in America. Anyone want to take a guess as to when the Hanukkah Mound was built? It was in that 100 BC to 400 AD time period, which is when everything else we're seeing is happening. So Hanukkah Mound is a Hopewell mound. It's a part of a whole mound complex. It is now destroyed. It no longer exists, but this is what it used to look like. And I don't know if you guys are familiar with old oil lamps, but this is exactly what an old oil lamp looked like. This outer structure is very clearly an oil lamp, and this inner structure is very clearly a menorah. So you have the old Jewish oil lamp that's, goes along with the menorah. You fill the menorah with oil, and you have the menorah. Very, very, very obviously Hebrew influence with this. And this is, roughly 2,000 years old. Yeah, these people. It's roughly 2,000 years old. And there were a couple of attempts to dismiss this, and they are, unsurprisingly, just laughable. So one of the attempts to dismiss this is some of the mainstream tried to claim this is actually a bird. This is not a menorah and an oil lamp. This is actually supposed to be a bird. And, if you go to Wikipedia and look this thing up, it even lists that as a secondary explanation to the menorah and oil lamp, because even they are like, man, that's really a stretch. That's pushing it. So that was one attempt. And another attempt came back when this thing still existed. This guy was like, yeah, no way is this Hebrew. So he goes out and he surveys it, and he goes, yeah, this isn't even shaped like this. This is not how this even looks. And it couldn't even look this. The landscape wouldn't even allow it to look this way. You couldn't even build it here. This is ridiculous. It's impossible. And so then people went, okay, explain what you mean. And he goes, no, man. No. Like, can you show us the results of your survey? No, man. Okay, well, what'd you mean about the landscape not even allowing it? Just trust me, bro. So he provided absolutely zero evidence. And this thing was surveyed more than once. It was surveyed by multiple different groups of people. And one of the groups of people was the United States military. So, yeah, this thing is legit. This thing existed. It no longer exists, unfortunately. It was the victim of farmers, it would seem. Let me reconnect here. But yeah, a few pathetic attempts at dismissing it, but really no serious dismissal whatsoever. And I don't know how you could look at that and deny that it is undeniably Hebrew, that it is, so very clearly a menorah and an oil lamp. Let's see if I can repin this so you guys can call in if you wish. So yeah, I'm going to go through several more examples of supporting evidence that Hebrews were actually here in this time period, intermingling with the Native Americans. But this one is, like, to me, the nail in the coffin. I mean, the other ones are a little bit easier to dismiss. The other ones, I think, are fantastic evidence, but like there at least are, there's ways to wiggle out of them, right? Like if you're trying to find an alternate explanation, you can find an alternate explanation, generally speaking. But for the Hanukkah mound, I don't know. Can you guys think of anything else? Can you guys think of anything else? Because I can't. Also, I think it was the Hanukkah mound Wikipedia. Let me see if it is real quick, because there was something really funny I saw on Wikipedia. I keep finding very funny things on Wikipedia. It doesn't look like it was this. It was a different. It was the Decalogue Stones Wikipedia, I think. So the reasons for dismissal are quite hilarious to me sometimes, and one of the reasons for dismissal of the Decalogue Stone was that the guy who discovered it, here it is. However, Hibbins' testimony is tainted by charges that in at least 2 separate incidents, he fabricated some or all of his archaeological data to support his pre-Clovis migration theory. Oh, these motherfuckers. So, in case you guys aren't fully aware, which I'm pretty confident you all are, pre-Clovis is obviously true. There were obviously people here before Clovis, and still to this day, just like Hancock is saying, these people are still getting attacked for this shit. These people were labeled as fraudsters and hoaxers and fakes and liars, even though they did nothing of the sort. They just discovered evidence and presented the evidence they discovered, and they had their careers ruined. And look at them, they go, oh, this other artifact, the Decalogue Stone, it's also obviously a fake, because this fucking charlatan who proved pre-Clovis, well, we can't trust his, it's just, oh, ugh. Oh, man. Yeah, the Indians did have metallurgy in Ohio. That's part of what my presentation's about, man. They absolutely did. And the Hopewell, which made those mounds, had these copper artifacts. These are, digital recreations of them. But you can see there's a collar here. There's an interesting vase here. There's swastikas. There's something that kind of resembles the Ankh. Pretty closely resembles the Ankh there. Some very interesting things. They had copper plates with writing on them and stuff as well. Many Native American tribes had copper plates with writing on them. Most of these plates have been lost to time. Some of them still exist, but aren't available to access, but they're still physically in existence. But yeah, a lot of these had copper plates, and at least one of these tribes had copper plates where these very pre-America, these are settlers way before America was ever established, making contact with these Indians. They were Puritan Christians, and they viewed these copper plates that would come out during the corn festival, and their words were that the surest way to heaven was by following the doctrine of these plates. So they had these Hebrew plates that had, Hebrew scripture on them, then, and these early Christians viewed them. What happened to these plates? Who knows? Some of the other, I will talk about the Decalogue stone a little bit more. But before I get into that, that point right there, that's what you get for thinking you found anything older than Clovis. I've made this point a few times, and I'll probably make it a few more. And I've made it specifically in relation to the Michigan relics, and I think the Michigan relics are very relevant to this conversation. They appear to be depicting exactly what I'm trying to form together here, which is that the ancient Hebrews came to America and actually intermingled with the Native Americans. But, there are constantly people finding these artifacts, and they sometimes do bring them to archaeologists. And it's not uncommon for an archaeologist to respond with, yeah, this doesn't, you didn't actually find this in the way you think you found it, and no report is made, and it's just dismissed, and it doesn't get logged anywhere in any shape or form. So, I've made the point that the Michigan artifacts, none have been found since these two guys found them, but I think it's extremely likely that if another one was found, they would just say, they would just say, yeah, no, you didn't. And it wouldn't get recorded. Mr. G, how are you doing?
Living that dream, dog. You?
I'm doing great.
My heart swells for what you said in the beginning of the show.
Thanks, buddy. Much appreciated.
You're
awesome.
No problem. Oh man, somebody's driving a motorcycle by real loud. Hold on a second. Sorry about that.
Can't even hear it.
I think that I saw something about that one. The Hanukkah mound, where that was like the military went and they mapped all of, maybe 40 of them or something, and that was the only one they blew up.
Yeah.
It was that one. And then, there's actually mounds like in Wisconsin, and then they go out into Canada that actually look like birds. You know what I mean? There are actual bird effigy mounds, so that whole it was supposed to be a bird stuff kind of doesn't.
I mean, it is a 1-for-1 representation of an oil lamp and menorah.
Correct.
It's 1-for-1. There's no wiggle room.
No way around it.
Yeah.
Right. And the bird ones are 1-for-1 representations of birds. You know what I mean? Like these people knew what they were depicting.
Yeah.
Period. But yeah, and there's also, I don't remember who or what tribe it was, but one of them was, saying basically that white people been coming here digging, mining forever, basically. And that, the copper had to go somewhere, right?
I've got a couple examples. Do you mind if I share an example? So to support that. So do you guys know Chief Joseph? I learned about Chief Joseph in middle school of the Nez Perce tribe, or however you pronounce that. He had the quote, and I'm about to butcher it, but it's like, on this spot today, I fight no more forever, or something along those lines. And I definitely didn't say that right, but it's something like that. And I learned about that, and I learned about the quote in school. What I don't think I learned about was that he had on him a cuneiform tablet. So,
right.
So you know about this. Okay. Yeah,
No, but it just makes perfect sense.
Okay.
Like you wouldn't hear about that. That's what I mean by the right. I knew nothing about it. But cuneiform's been popping up around here. You know what I mean? And again, it always gets discounted, like you said.
This is one of the very few examples that aren't outright denied by the mainstream. It's actually in West Point Museum. Wow. And they acknowledge that this is a legitimate find, that everything checks out. So when he was captured, when he surrendered, they took this cuneiform tablet from him. And this happened before cuneiform was translated, which is another theme that you see with a lot of these artifacts that I'm about to bring up, is that a lot of this stuff was discovered before these things were even translated, and yet they're still discounted as fakes. But yeah, so it was before cuneiform was translated. Turns out it's just a beer receipt. It's a nothing tablet.
That's all right.
It's completely insignificant.
That's hilarious.
But
that actually kind of makes it kind of funnier in that, like, why would you fake a beer receipt?
Right.
You know?
And Chief Joseph, his story of where he got this was that it had been passed down in his family for generations, and that it came from white travelers from the sea long before Columbus.
Right.
So,
right. It's always believe the Indigs until they say some shit like that. Then it's like, whoa, well, except for that one.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And in Ohio, so I just went to one of the. It's called Fort Ancient, and there's a museum there, and it's been turned into World UNESCO's heritage site. Right? There's like 7 of these mounds. And that's the museum that houses a bunch of these copper artifacts that you're talking about.
Okay. There's a lot of really good museums out there, and it's unfortunate that, like, they seem to be the lesser known ones, you know?
Yeah, and that big mica one, you know, it looks like a bird or something. That one's there, or it looks like maybe a bird or a claw or something, but that one's there. There's a bunch of the copper ones, though. It's pretty crazy. And then the last thing I was going to say, and I freaking pulled a CRS moment, and I can't remember. You'll have that. But I don't remember now. Dang it.
Yeah.
Oh, well. You'll have that.
Yeah, it happens.
All right, dog.
Yeah.
Talk to you later, Tater.
Thanks for the call, man.
Yeah, I know what it was. My boy says he knows what's up with that cup. And we're going to try to make sure we call him. He's going to call him next week, I hope. I'll confirm that with you, though, for sure.
Yeah. Next week I have Wandering Wolf coming on, Mr. Mike Collins.
Okay. So wait for the following week then?
If that's not inconvenient, yeah, that'd probably work better. But yeah.
I mean, I don't think it should be a problem. I can't speak for him, but you know what I mean?
Right.
I think more time the better, probably. To plan for it, you know. I mean, not that he.
But yeah, he's open to talk about it, which is awesome because I would really appreciate, you know, getting someone who actually knows what they're talking about because I don't. So that would be cool.
Yeah, he told me, I have no idea, something about, I think he said you got to throw gold on it or something else, and it makes it change colors. And then he showed me some stuff he did, and you look at it, and it's one thing, like the glass, like it's crazy, dude. The glass is clear, and then he shines a black light on it, and it's a different color.
Yeah,
you know what I mean?
I'm a lot less curious about the color changing aspects and just the actual workmanship. I am aware that the color changing aspects, you have a very, 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 very narrow margin of error for accomplishing that. So you have to theoretically know exactly how much gold dust and silver dust to add into this glass. But the mainstream explanation for how this was accomplished was purely on accident. This master glass craftsman wasn't even trying to mix in gold and silver dust. They just accidentally did it. They couldn't have possibly known the exact ratios that were needed in the micronization of this gold and silver dust because it has to be crushed down to the exact size and everything as well. And so it was just purely on accident, which is insane to me that someone who's skilled enough to make that would do that.
Right.
But
my man is telling me all about it, and I don't know much. I don't understand it, but like I think certain things happen. Temperatures are important in this game. I think with the way that the color. You know what I mean? And the way the stuff burns, I don't know. But anyway, and the way that I know that the way that these people get their colors and stuff is like, you know, really highly guarded secrets. So I don't think it's that these people are, you know, like you said, it's not a random thing. These dudes know what they're doing. They're working at their craft, and they're not going to let their secrets go for, you know, to every chump.
Yeah, and What's interesting, and I mean, it's not really interesting, it makes perfect sense to me, is that no other similar piece has ever been found, this color-changing kind of piece. Not like that, at least. And so that's one of the reasons why they go, well, this was obviously just an accident, because we don't see this, like, progression of work, or all of these practice pieces and stuff like that. But we're talking a couple thousand years ago, pieces of glass. You know, glass breaks, right? Like, and like you're saying, it's protected, so.
I think we're kind of poisoned in our modern era where we're so used to uniformity and things being out there and you just have them that, you know, in the old days it didn't work like that. For a guy to get to that level, like, how did that go down? You know what I mean? Like, you probably were either in a guild or like worked under some kind of rich guy who could do and afford the, you know what I mean? The things to set your whole thing up. I mean,
Yeah,
it was an entirely
I mean, that was,
different
yeah.
world before
There
the
were
Industrial Revolution.
king-sponsored alchemists. They all had them, you know.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
So it's like, I don't know, man. These people know what they were doing, and their craftsmanship, you know what I mean, speaks to that too. And I didn't realize that was the aspect you want to go with too. I'll make sure you know.
Yeah, because I mean, when I look at that thing as someone who doesn't know about glassblowing, it's one of the most impressive pieces I've ever seen. Like, I've seen a lot of really crazy bongs and stuff, but even when you look at those, you can like see where glass is connecting to other glass. Like, you can see seams and stuff. You look at this thing and I don't see a single seam. I don't see any type of imperfection whatsoever. It's one of the most perfect looking pieces of glass I've ever seen. And so I wonder how many people today would be capable of that. In no way do I think we wouldn't be able to make that today. I think, of course, we would. But is it 5 people? Is it 50 people? Is it 50,000 people? You know,
there's a dude. He showed me this guy making these paperweights, dude, and this stuff he's doing, dude.
I saw one just the other day of a little fish swimming with some coral. It was cool as shit.
Real fish, right? I mean, the thing looks real. Like, they use his leaves in a museum, and I think in the Smithsonian or something. They don't use real leaves. They use this dude's like blows of the leaves, man.
There's I got into marble art years ago briefly, and I never bought any because these things get crazy expensive. But yeah, it is pretty mind-blowing what people are doing with this stuff.
Yeah. Oh, word. And one last thing I was thinking about with the craftsman thing where, you know, like one guy that just pops off. I saw something where they found, I don't know who the they is either, but found I think it was like a Viking village or something. They found a flush toilet. You know what I mean? Like this old ass wooden flush toilet, dude. You know, like they had indoor plumbing and there was a flush toilet in some Viking era. You know what I mean? Like, people invent crap. They're inventive, but it didn't. There's no industrial revolution to, you know, make everything factoryized and, you know, make everything uniform and the same and just bash them out. You know, it wasn't like that back then.
The more you learn about history, the more you learn that across the board, things that you think these people didn't have, the level of primitive that you think they were, it's just completely misrepresented. You'll find examples like that all over the place. Not just toilets, but like things in that vein. Air conditioning, you know, heat and cooling management and plumbing and just these technologies that you're like, oh, of course they didn't have that. And you're like, oh, not only did they, but they had it and half a dozen cultures around them had it and they had all these other things. And it's like...
It's just like I mean, to think that you, like, again, it's this idea that we're the pinnacle, man. Like, half of us, man, we couldn't have survived back then. You know, we couldn't have survived 100 years ago with all the work, some of us. You know what I mean? I don't got calluses. Well, I do now because I started whittling, but, you know, calluses on my hand and shit. Yeah. Like, so it's like, you know.
No, we are
actually worked, and they're probably smarter than we are now, you know?
As a society, I do believe we are the most advanced we've provably been, right? Yeah. You know, whether Atlantis 12,000 years ago or something, but like provably within the last 8,000 years or whatever, we're the most advanced as a society we've been. As individuals, we have regressed further than we ever have before. Like, we are less capable of doing anything real than we've ever been before. We're more separated from production in all reality than ever before. We're babies. We're absolute infants.
Dude, I held the door for a lady today, and she told me I was kind. I was like, it blew my mind. Like, this old lady, I'm like, no, isn't that what I'm supposed to do? Like, it's not, you know what I mean? It kind of like took me off guard for a second. Like, was nobody holding the door for this old lady? What the hell? You know, like, it's not an act of kindness. It's like kind of my, you know, duty to the world. I'm an able-bodied.
Yes, this used to be just standard.
Exactly. You know what I mean? When did it drop to the point where you're getting, I have to bring it up in a thing that, and say to people like, oh my God, when I went to Kentucky, the service was insane down there. You know what I mean? People like, helping you out, and they don't just like tell you to F off. And, you know what I mean? It's just like, it's just little things that have devolved in the world like that.
What was the, Idiocracy was like, welcome to butt fuckers, go fuck yourself or something.
Yes, exactly. And I'm going to go pour my Gatorade on my plants because that's what they need.
Yeah.
Plants crave it. Electrolytes, right?
Yeah.
All right, guys.
Have yourself
a good afternoon. I'm looking forward to the rest of it.
Yeah, thanks for the call, man.
Yep, bye.
Okay, so back to more examples supporting this Hebrew from 100 BC to 400 AD. There seems to have been not only Hebrews that came to America, but actually intermingled with these Native American tribes. And one of the things I was pointing out with the Michigan relics and with the Brewers Cave, or the Burroughs Cave rather, artifacts, was that you had this weird amalgamation of Christian imagery, of Hebrew imagery, and then you had Native Americans very clearly being depicted alongside with it. And it was like, that was a weird kind of mixture to see. But then you look at the Hopewell culture, you look at that mound, the Hanukkah mound, and you have what is a part of a Native American mound site, right? This mound was not in isolation. It was a part of a complex. And these other mounds are undeniably Native American, right? And so why do you have this undeniably Hebrew mound alongside these undeniably Native American mounds? And the only thing I can think is that these people were intermingling, and I've got several more examples to cover to support that intermingling and to prove that intermingling. But I am going to go ahead and take Slav's call. Slav, I have to say, you can be a little bit rambly on here, so try and keep it concise. Try and make your point, and do so in less than 30 minutes. Try and keep it to like a 10-minute point if you can. I think I let you in, but I don't know. Did you like hang up right when I tried to click to let you? Oh no, you're in here. All right.
Oh, you hear me now?
I hear you now.
Cool. Let's see. Let me just grab my notes. The one note that I wrote down. I think I should have wrote down too. One of the first thing was this whole movement of we need to like celebrate indigenous communities, even though, and then this whole movement of this whole like tolerance of we was kings, or we were very highly infrastructurized technological societies, yet they can't replicate it. I think this is all just a plot by NGOs and social movements and groups to just justify funding. Does that make sense at first?
Yeah. I think that the modern aspect that you're talking about, yes, I agree with. The ancient aspect, I somewhat agree with, but I see the same pattern in the Americas as I see in the rest of the world. You see a level of advancement being achieved way, way, way back. You go back to the earliest times and you're actually a pretty damn advanced civilization, and then you see a fall happen and people trying and failing to recover that level of advancement. And you see that in the old world and the new world. So, I do tend to disagree that these people were just savage idiots. Their inability to reproduce it, yes, you do see that. You also see that in the old world, but then at some point they do overcome that. So and they do reproduce it, and then we reach where we've reached today. So it's certainly open for debate. I don't really think they were just purely savages. I think there was more going on. I think they achieved some pretty good heights in the past, but yeah.
That's the other thing is, it's like
Unless you want to talk about the Abos, then that's a different story.
Dude, 20,000 years on that fucking rock, and they couldn't even develop structure.
I shouldn't have said that. I knew that, but
like, dude, come on. The same thing with the Horis. I mean, Hori is basically the Abo version of Mars.
But what were you calling before? I don't want to get you more off topic. So what were you calling about, Slav? What do your notes say?
It was more of stuff in the chat. So like things with the metallurgy and the glass blowing, but so I think they're literally like everyone that is supporting this whole movement of we need to celebrate them. They're about to hit this roadblock where it is literally like they're like we can celebrate everything about what these people say except when they start mentioning giants or when they start mentioning white people before Columbus or all this stuff.
Like, that is a really good point. That's a very good point.
They're hitting the roadblock, and all I know is...
And there's a lot of consistency in their stories along those lines. Like, it's not just one group of that's saying this. Like, you find a pretty big amount of consistency among tribes claiming similar stories.
I mean, talking about long-haired white men come in with beards.
Beards, yeah.
I mean, yeah, dude.
How do you even come up with that unless you see it?
Yeah, no, but it's like it takes it took them months to sail across the Atlantic Ocean. I don't think people are really interested in, grooming their hair and their beards. So yeah, of course, they probably set sail with like clean faces and bald heads.
Well, also Native Americans don't grow beards. That's really so. If you're a Native American and all you've seen your entire life is other Native Americans and you've never seen anything different, where do you even come up with the idea of, hey, let's just create this group of white-skinned people who are basically the same, except they have hair on their faces and their skin's white. Like, how do you even come up with that unless you see it? And like I said, this isn't just one group of people that came up with it. It's pretty ubiquitous across, Native culture.
I mean, if we're going to keep talking physical characteristics, it's, what is it? Most of the Reds, you look at their noses, they're long noses. They're not short and squat like the Africans, because... I mean, Africans, they have their features the way they do is because, they come from warm equatorial climates. So their bodies basically act as radiators, to
they're
like
different features. Body heat.
And then you got Europeans, like those closer to the northern poles, they have either, rounder bodies.
You gotta be real pale if you're trying to get vitamin D in a place that's dark for 3 months a year.
3 months, bro. It's more. Dude, look at places like, fucking Alaska or... I'm still surprised they still would say, like, the world's happiest countries are all Nordic countries that experience,
Well, there could be something else going on there just besides sunlight.
I mean, they say, if we're talking Nordic countries, dude, they say like, look at them, they have free healthcare and all this stuff. It's like, yeah, but it's all subsidized because they have natural petroleum extraction, which everyone blames. Like, everyone who supports socialism and communism is anti-oil. But all the references they make is countries who literally support and prop up their own economy based off the extraction of petroleum.
Fun fact that I think you'll appreciate, Slav, a couple fun facts. So not only is Michigan have the largest, most pure, most accessible copper deposits in the world, no mining occurs in Michigan. And back in early America, the Jesuits were the first people to find these copper deposits in Michigan. So just a couple fun facts.
Wait, you're telling me there's 0 mines in Michigan?
0 active mines in Michigan. It is outlawed.
Oh, Oh, so y'all used to have them, but now y'all can't no more?
Yep, and I haven't looked into the story. I think something like a workers' strike happened, and then since then they outlawed it for some reason. I don't know the details. There's something going on there though, because the biggest copper deposits in the world, the most pure and the most accessible, they're literally just sitting on the ground. You can walk around and pick up copper in this area, and we're not taking advantage of it. That's rather interesting.
I get it. I think I've seen a few like Instagram videos or something where dudes have like giant 60-pound, like 3 feet by 3 feet chunks of like naturally occurring copper with the seams.
There's much bigger chunks than that, but yeah.
Oh yeah, dude. Yeah, dude. Literally, it's like when you learn geology and how blessed America is, and also how like blessed Russia is, like with the Ural Mountains, just like in Africa as well. You're like, okay, yeah, I get it. Igneous intrusions, the Farallon Plate, which is like there's all the continental crust plates and stuff like that that make up the world, and you've seen those maps. But before that, there was a Farallon Plate, and it slid underneath the North American craton, and basically just deposited all the things that make up all these minerals, and yeah, basically, and drew in a bunch of like seawater. I mean, that's basically how you get mineral deposits. It does literally just makes you think like intelligent design. God's like, okay, here's this, here's that, here's this. You do with the rest you want with it.
So then you also look at like the Amazon, which is intelligent human design. It's like there's a lot of terraforming that happened in America. The amount of mounds, the whole countryside was covered in mounds. There was a lot going on here that just isn't known about by most people. The history of America is massively covered up, and it's wildly different from what we've been presented.
Yeah, I did, and that's the thing. I just found that out from the chat that like the whole Ohio military, I guess I'm guessing National Guard, like they surveyed a bunch of places and blew it up, and I was like, they probably passed this shit, It's I think that's what they're just gonna keep doing. I mean, my thing is, I think they're just they're using all this celebrate diversity kind of thing to run cover. Or, I mean, dude, for instance, like fucking every single ad I get on YouTube, I only get one every single time. It is the Wells Fargo ad saying like, oh, we've donated, $400 million to support, indigenous American native.
Another fun fact, the checkout prompts going, hey, would you like to donate to child hunger or whatever it is? If you click yes, that is Walmart taking your money and then donating your money. So you don't get credit for that donation. They get credit for that donation. They claim it on their taxes. So when you do that, you're just paying their taxes. So never, ever donate through like a store at their receipt, step. Donate directly to the foundations if you're compelled to donate. But otherwise, you are just paying these corporations taxes. That's all.
Oh yeah, dude. Dude. Anytime I see that prompt or even get asked, I'm like, you people already. Okay, I'd still say you people directly to the cashier's face, and I know it's just a cashier. They're just clocking in, clocking out. I'm like, your boss has already made the donation. This money is just their write-off. Like, and you don't realize it, and they're like, okay, have a good survey, whatever.
But yeah. And then they use that in their advertising campaigns too. Like the Walmart by my house has a big banner hung up. They're like, we donated $20 million to stop child hunger, and it's like, no, all of the people coming into your store donated that.
And the other thing is, I don't like the idea of cash donations, because if you want to help, you volunteer your time and your body. Like, donating money, it just seems like, look, it's like superficial.
We're getting a little off track here.
Help. Yeah, but
what else you have in your notes, Slav?
The last one is, it's just all this the whole thing of practicality is when all this, whether you want to call it the truth or hidden truth or whatever, like, how are they gonna like regulate it, like legislatively wise? Like, how do you think the people who are in charge, who basically, for instance, Trump was like, yeah, they told me about this shit about JFK, and if I told anyone else, they would lose their minds. Well, what happens when people realize, like, oh wow, they've been lying to us all along. Oh wow, there's like
nothing
they taught us about.
Nothing happens. Look at what we're doing right now. I am attacking archaeology and going, they have been lying to us. Here's proof that they've been. Every week I come on here and I provide proof of archaeological lies and historical lies. This week, several of them, and I haven't gotten to a bunch of them yet. I still have a lot more I want to get to, but I do this every week, and what happens? Nothing. They have so effectively set the narrative that a couple of people coming out and speaking the truth doesn't mean anything. You can look at the Joe Rogan and Dibble debate, the Hancock and Dibble debate. Even though the majority of people sort of sided with Hancock because Dibble was such a miserable asshole, it's like it hasn't actually shifted anything. It hasn't actually changed anything. People are still buying into the narrative of history, even if they are open to the idea of Atlantis, even if they believe in Atlantis. It's such a big topic that even if someone was out here just explicitly preaching the truth, just going fact, right? Like, it wouldn't even matter, because the depth of the brainwashing and the depth of the reality that needs to be exposed, it's too much of a learning curve. It's too great to overcome for your average person. So 1% of 1% of people are actually going to pursue this and go, holy shit, I know the truth, I know everything's a lie. And what does that accomplish? It doesn't accomplish anything. So, without some type of really, really radical shift towards things, they're pretty secure in their position. And a couple of people piecing things together and drawing associations isn't going to change anything, because as one of the strongest themes of tonight and of most weeks, all of the examples that I provided, except for the Chief Joseph example, are just outright denied. Even no matter how undeniable they are, they're just ignored and denied. You get the Hanukkah Mound, and it's like, you don't even hear about that because they destroy it and they just try and cover it up. And they don't even attempt to dismiss this one. Did you notice how the Hanukkah Mound, they don't attempt to dismiss? All of these other stories, they have serious attempts to dismiss them, but the Hanukkah Mound, it's too undeniable. It's so undeniable that they do their best to just not discuss it at all. They don't want to talk about it at all. They don't even want to draw attention to it by dismissing it. So,
I didn't even know about the Hanukkah Mound until
exactly.
you showed it on screen today. And what's interesting is, I've been drawing and doing art like ever since I was like a little kid, but what's interesting is that they have right angles. You never see right angle, like multiple right angles, parallelism. You never see that in these so-called celebrated art of indigenous cultures. It's always, dots and curvy lines to, draw animals and stuff. But you never see like straight.
South America, you see plenty of it, but it's different art style in North America.
And it's still, I think it's still really impressive how the pyramids at Chichen Itza in the Yucatan, like the most famous ones they always show, during the summer solstice, the sunlight hits directly on the stairs and it creates like a lit up snake. I'm like, dude, that is thousands of years ago. And this whole thing of like, oh, they saw, Spanish people come and they get off their horse and like, wow, one creature became two. I'm like, yeah, but these motherfuckers can like calculate a calendar somehow.
Yeah, and like again, calculating precession accurately is ridiculous. Even just calculating an Earth perspective calendar accurately is quite the challenge, and they did it with absolute perfection. This meeting is about to end, by the way, Slav. I'm hanging up on you in any second now. Right there, it just happened. So, yep. Alrighty. All right, let me try and cover a couple more examples, and then I'm gonna get out of here. This is a long episode, but I have been digging into this for the last month straight, and like you're getting just the tip of the iceberg. I have found so many more examples than what I'm providing. Today, and part of that is just because like the time to present everything is not possible. Part of it is because a lot of these examples just aren't as concrete. They're not as solid. They're supporting, right? It is adding to the pattern. It's adding to the theme, but it's not necessarily something that is robust enough that I feel it's worth presenting. Or there's just a lack of information in general. A lot of these things have been lost. I have brought up like the copper plates of these ancient tribes, but I haven't gone into each specific example because so much of it has just been lost. And so it's a sentence here, it's a sentence there. So you're getting the tip of the iceberg. There is so much more. So whatever I am showing you, there's so much more to be seen. I want to talk about the Newark Holy Stones a little bit more. Again, I talked about them last week, but these are a perfect example of, just the attitude, I don't know what the heck that is, of archaeology. And I, again, did not highlight the parts of this article that I wanted to read, but I'll just talk about them a little bit. So there's a whole collection that it's not just these two stones. There's very limited images here. Let me see if Google Images shows me anything better. And you can see these are actually like stone containers, and some of these, like this one, has not seemingly been opened. But there's these Newark Holy Stones which were found by a guy who was trying to prove the Book of Mormon. This is Hebrew writing on these stones. Newark is in Ohio, same place as the Hanukkah Mound, same place as the Cahokia Mound, and same place as the Hopewell culture that had lots of Michigan copper and many other interesting artifacts like these swastikas. Okay, and so this guy was digging in some of the old mounds that he was finding in America, looking for evidence of the Mormon faith. And he found these Newark Holy Stones. He copied, he made some sketches of them, and he sent them off to archaeologists because he was like, I found something, I want to give this to the people who can validate me. I've made this legitimate discovery. Let me give this to legitimate archaeologists and validate it. And their reaction was the same reaction that you get every single time, which is denial, 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 and attack, attack, attack. And they actually attacked this guy so viciously. They were really attacking his character and his intelligence. Just call it this. He's a retard farmer. Look at all the errors in this letter isn't right. These words aren't right. Nothing. There's so many mistakes. An absolute retard made these fakes. And then they got their hands on the actual artifacts themselves, and they went, oh shit. None of the mistakes that were in the sketches are in the artifacts themselves. The artifacts are legit Hebrew. Whoever made these artifacts did know Hebrew, and they attacked the guy based off his sketches so intensely that they had to be like, well, obviously this guy's a retard. He couldn't have made these. We've made that painfully clear. But these are legit Hebrew, so someone else faked these and then buried them here, and then he found them later. Pretty flimsy dismissal, and that's the entire dismissal. There's no other reason to dismiss it other than this guy was looking for Mormon evidence. Were you waiting for me to list another reason? Because there isn't. That's it. That's the entire reason for the dismissal. And this was carbon dated. The Newark Holy Stones were carbon dated. So if I go back to this Wikipedia article, and there's several examples of finds along these lines. And what's the date right here? 100 BC to 500 AD. Woo, buddy! We just keep seeing those numbers. So, and I mean, yes, we're seeing these numbers again because I brought them up last week. But there is a strong pattern of these numbers. So AD 85 to AD 135 with a 95% probability. There was wood found along with these. The wood, from my understanding, because he pulled the stones out, the wood was still in situ. So, one, where would this guy even get wood that was 2,000 years old if he were to try and forge this and fake this? But two, that didn't even happen. The wood was still in situ when it was carbon dated, or at least before it was pulled out to be carbon dated. So this is, I don't know how they deny it, but because he was looking for Mormon evidence, they do. These are labeled as a hoax in the museum. It's a pretty entertaining read, this Wikipedia article. You'll see some interesting things if you do read through it. Another example is the Decalogue Stone. So the Decalogue Stone also has some things that I were chuckling at in its Wikipedia article. The Los Lunas Mystery Stone, which, as I pointed out earlier, is dismissed because that idiot who thought that pre-Clovis was a thing, that guy who had his entire career destroyed because he was stupid enough to believe that people came over here before Clovis, that is what's used to dismiss this artifact. So someone who was correct about the Clovis culture not being the first, someone who presented his ideas and presented his evidence and had his career ruined for it, then goes, yeah, well, you just keep faking shit. You obviously faked that Clovis evidence that was completely legitimate. And so because you faked that Clovis evidence that was completely legitimate, that obviously means you're faking this other evidence that's also completely legitimate. So this is more Hebrew writing. Let me see where it's found. In New Mexico, right? So nowhere near, oh, well, maybe not, but, not Ohio, certainly. And this was, there's another line I wanted to read here. Okay, here. The reported 1880s date of discovery is important to those who believe that the stone is pre-Columbian. However, the Paleo-Hebrew script, which is closely related to the Phoenician script, was known to scholars by at least 1870, thus not precluding the possibility of a modern hoax. Let me reread that and add some emphasis here. It was known to scholars by at least 1870. So it was known to scholars. This stuff is not immediately published. This is pre-internet, right? So scholars on the forefront of the research deciphering this script in 1870 by no means whatsoever means that anyone in the general public in America would know about this and know about it to the point that they would actually be able to read it and forge it themselves. That assertion is frankly ridiculous, which is why they say, thus not precluding the possibility of a modern hoax, because they know it's a completely ridiculous idea. Yes, it does preclude it. Theoretically, no, it doesn't make it absolutely impossible. Theoretically, there is a very slim margin of possibility that this could have been done and hoaxed, but frankly, it's a ridiculous proposition. Scholars knew about it, less than a decade before. They were just translating it less than a decade before. The idea of someone hoaxing this in New Mexico, ridiculous. So it's an over 80-ton stone. It could be between 500 and 2,000 years old. It's a very wide date range, but hey, that falls into my date range of 100 BC to 500 AD. And again, it's just another example of these things being completely dismissed, despite their reason for the dismissal being ridiculous. And there's several more examples I could go over. I don't know if any of you follow The Mystery of Oak Island. It's a fun TV show if you're into this kind of stuff. But they've found all kinds of things, including a Roman sword on a shipwreck off the coast of Oak Island. Obviously, there was travel across here pre-Columbian. The Ogham language I've mentioned. There are so many examples of the Ogham language being found in America. So I don't think it was exclusively Hebrews and these other groups coming to America in this time period. You see a lot of Ogham as well. You see a lot of evidence of the Celts. You hear these reports of these Celtic burial mounds, which unfortunately get covered up. But there's enough reports of these that I've got to believe there's some validity to them. And then you do see these Ogham inscriptions on stones. You saw the Ogham in the Michigan relics. You saw the Ogham, or was it only the Brute? No, sorry, not in the Michigan relics. Although it could be, because I've seen very few of the Michigan relics. There were 30,000 of them. I wouldn't be surprised at all if you saw Ogham on them. I haven't personally seen it, but you see it in the Burroughs Cave relics. You see Ogham on the Burroughs Cave relics, along with the Hebrew stuff, along with the Native Americans. Could all three of these cultures been intermingling in the Americas? And here's a wacky idea. If you want to really get speculative and wacky with me, there's a lot of connections that people have made between ancient Hebrew and ancient Celtic languages. And there have been these associations between the Celts and the Hebrews that have been made. And there does seem to be some kind of connection, but the explanation has been quite elusive. And some people have, whatever you can call it, white supremacy if you want, but like they posit the idea that Celts were the original Atlanteans and they spread all over the place, and that's why you see these connections between like ancient Hebrew and Celtic languages, because they were the real progenitors that spread all over. However, what about this? What about the Celts came to America around 100 BC, 400 AD, and so did the Hebrews, and they all mixed together here in America, and these associations that you see between these cultures got taken back across the water because they were mingling in America. I don't know. Maybe, but they were definitely here. The Celts were definitely here. The Hebrews were definitely here, and I'm willing to bet that a whole lot of other groups were definitely here too. Cocaine mummies and all of that. It is undeniable that these people were coming over here. And at this point, I would say that it's undeniable that they were actually coming over here and settling over here and establishing, settlements that seem to have lasted for at least a few hundred years, about 2,000 years ago. And they, so I think that's where I'm going to wrap up this episode. I've been streaming for a while now. And I had a lot of fun. I hope you guys had fun too. There's a lot more I could continue presenting on this. There's more examples and all kinds of stuff. But I'm gonna go ahead and read through chat. And you guys have said a lot, so I'll just be sitting here quietly for a minute. And I think that's the episode. So let me keep scrolling up. There's bigger than 2-ton copper nugs. There's a 3-ton copper nug in the Smithsonian. There's a whole bunch. And one of the little things I left out was just more supporting evidence for the time range of like 7,000 years ago, these copper mines, is that multiple pits have been found, multiple copper pits where they were excavating copper in the ancient past, and these giant multi-ton copper nuggets are stacked up on wooden planks and logs, and the logs have been carbon dated and dendrochronology dated and stuff, and they go back 7,000 years. I was also talking about the volume mined. It's estimated to be between anywhere of about 110 million pounds and 1.5 billion pounds of copper mined in the ancient past from Michigan. So even on the lowest end estimate, it's just a ridiculous amount of copper. And these estimates generally are not taking into account the float copper, the copper that's literally just sitting on the surface of the ground. They're making these calculations by the tens of thousands of pits for mining copper that have been discovered across the area. And so I don't know about you guys, but if I was trying to get copper, I would probably pick up all the copper that's sitting on the ground on the surface before I started mining. So if 110,000 on the low end is what's estimated to have been mined from the ground, or 110 million pounds on the low end is what's estimated to be mined from the ground in the ancient past. It was probably significantly more than that. I can only, because you can find today, you can just walk around and find chunks of copper sitting on the ground today still. So how much was picked up in the past before they even ever started digging? I got to imagine it was a pretty significant amount. Suck it, Canada. And Mexico, I guess. Mexico seems all right. My growing season is now. I'm real. Is that some kind of joke, Mr. Watson? What are Israeli villages called now? I don't know. Yeah. I think a lot have been destroyed now by farming. I think other mounds in that complex have been destroyed, but yeah, as far as blowing it up, that was the only one. That's a good thing to donate to. Is Dibble capitalizing on the? He's such a. I genuinely want to punch Dibble. Like I want to. I don't want to really hurt him. Like, but I maybe want to break his nose. You know what I'm saying? Like, I just want to inflict some pain. I just want to make him cry. I just want to make him cry and just stand over him like, hey, fucking bitch. I feel like it'd be pretty easy to make him cry, but he is quite the little cunt. Yeah, it's very true, Mr. G. Very true. Yeah, there's geometric mounds. The mounds are interesting, and the vast majority of them have been destroyed, but they were unbelievably numerous in the past. The Sioux were convenient enough to have the land of mountains full of gold, but not extract it, yet use the gold seems as being... Huh. Pre-Columbus, not pre-Clovis. When we were talking about that earlier. Yeah, 2,000 years. Again, the timeline. I think that there's likely been many visits across wide ranges of time, but there seems to be a very large increase in activity in that 100 BC to 400 AD time period, there seems to have been a lot of people coming over, and in large enough numbers that they're actually, making settlements. They're actually intermingling with the Indians, like the Hopewell culture. The Hopewell culture there's a lot of strangeness about the Hopewell culture. I've seen them come up several times before in past research and stuff. Like they're talked about in Ancient Aliens and stuff like that, because like they are quite distinct from most of these other cultures. And it would seem, from what I can tell, especially with that Hanukkah mound, man, sure seems to be their uniqueness comes because they were intermingling with these ancient Hebrews or whoever they were, and they mixed together and they created a little civilization that was this cross, right? And some of that lasted all the way throughout when Columbus got to the Americas. Like I was saying, those Native American copper plates that are inscribed with Hebrew scripture that the early American Christians were viewing. Some of this did last, but not much of it. All right. Oh, wait. Here we go. Still some more comments. Yeah, there's trade is good. I might have been in Ohio, but the natives had very extensive trade too. Like there's locations that were obviously trade hubs, and you'll find Michigan copper there. You'll find shells from Florida there. You'll find shells from California there. You'll find things from you even do get some intermingling of Aztecs coming up and Mayans coming up into the Americas. As well as vice versa. You've got some copper going down to South America. There's all kinds of trade. All of this whole narrative of the primitive Americas, it's not what it's presented as. They were trading, they were traveling, they were building, they had huge populations, they had roads, they had metallurgy, they had all kinds of things. And they had a significantly higher survival rate for skull surgery than we have today. They had a significantly higher survival rate than we had today. These people knew what the fuck they were doing. No thoughts on the Iranian cooling towers other than they're cool, and you can find similar things all over the world, all throughout the ancient past. So very cool. You find a lot of cool stuff that you don't hear about a lot. All right, that's the episode, folks. Thanks for sticking with me. I hope you guys enjoyed it. I enjoyed it. And next week, we will have on Mr. Mike Collins, the Wandering Wolf. He's going to be sharing some very cool American hidden history as well. So tune in. It should be a good one. So I'll catch you guys next week. Later, fellas.